Alright, so crazy hair day today. I got like halfway through the book. In fact, I got all the way to step one that it wants you to try after you learn all about the eating disorders that are in this book, which again is all three of the major ones. There are other eating disorders that like don't fit that it wants you to talk about. I'll say there's a couple things I don't love about the book. Well, there's three things I don't love about the book. It bugs me, and it might just be me and being a girl and stuff, but the way it always says like a woman's self-worth, women often choose that their self-worth is based on their the way they look and how skinny they are and how thin they are. I'm like, well, let's be honest, society teaches us to value ourselves that way and that our self-worth is based on that. Like that's what society tells us. It's not something women just choose to believe because it's fun. No. So that part was bugging me. But on the actual side of dieting, it does kind of make you feel like make you question a lot if it's severe enough that you need to fix it. Even though I know in my head that it when I went for help, when I went to the doctor, it was definitely severe enough. Like I was eating without thinking. I had thought about purging. I was eating till I was physically ill, starting to hide food, no control. So it really started, but there's still times like that the book makes you wonder, is it just a problem or is it an eating disorder? And again, that's just minor wording that probably triggers a little bit of the issues. And my other issue is how much they rely on, at times, the BMI index, which is just a garbage way to know if you're in the right weight class or not. You know, it doesn't consider your genetics, it doesn't consider if you are active in sports, it doesn't consider if you have any actual like diseases outside of this or things that might lead to weight gain. And it doesn't consider how you actually want to look and how what's beautiful to you and what feels good to you. So I don't use the BMI index. I once heard about it, and everybody I've talked to since, like every personal trainer, every nutritionist, even my own doctor was like, don't worry about the BMI index. We'll use that ourselves and tell you what the concerns are. But even they don't base it off that. They just base it off of who you are as a person. So it's a little outdated with that. Um, but other than that, it was really good. It taught me a lot about binge eating disorder. What causes binge eating disorder is still highly debatable. Um, like, why do they start? There's a social reason, there's a gender reason. A lot more women seem to do these kind of eating things. A lot of them start with adolescence and puberty. Um, they want to like link it to your family. So yeah, and it says dieting is a huge reason. When you start learning how to diet or you start dieting at a young age or you diet improperly, that can lead to having an eating disorder. But let's talk about um, what they want for step one, which I think is pretty cool. You do a lot of journaling and you have like these trackers to track your food intake. And then it asks you to check in with yourself every 3 to 4 days. You basically book a therapy appointment with yourself for half an hour every 3 to 4 days, and you go over these. Or if you have a therapist, which hopefully one day, you can go over these with your therapist, and they can actually um, learn with you and go through the process with you. You can also have a friend or a family member who's going to help you go through this. And you do each step for a few days, for 4 days, check in, and then you do it for 4 more days, check in. And then you decide if you're ready for the next step, but you have to have the first step down before you can move to the second step. And then if the second step isn't working, you kind of back up and you go back to the first step, which makes sense to me. Some steps of the program will not be relevant. For instance, if this is going to be all about, if there's a step all about binge eating, or in this case, or purging, like this one's all about vomiting and laxatives, that doesn't apply to me because I don't do that. So I don't need to write that part down. But you write down reasons why you ate. What do you think triggered you? Because even though you're not actually, like, you don't feel like you're thinking you're in control, usually you are thinking of something before you binge eat. So unless someone to help you, step one is just weekly weigh-ins, only weekly. You don't want to weigh every day. I remember doing that with Herbal Magic and it was terrible. You want to look at what you eat during your binges. How does it compare with what you eat when you're not in your binges? And I looked at that today and I'm actually wondering if I need to eat more carbohydrates during the day because if I'm not eating enough, I'm going to crave them in the evening. So I might play around with that tomorrow. What are the triggers? Feelings of tension. Or are you feeling tension and then you eat to relieve that? Probably a big one for me. And then are you doing it to punish yourself? Hard to say. That would probably need a therapist for me. Do you binge when you get tense, angry, or whenever you break a dietary rule that you've made up for yourself? And so then you keep this, and it actually in step one doesn't want you to change your eating habits too much. It just wants you to start monitoring. So that's kind of nice. Never take days off. Do not omit things. And I know myself, when I did Herbal Magic, we had to keep a food journal. When I've journaled for other fitness people, I've binged and just not said anything. And I think when eventually, if I do show my therapist journals, I'm going to have to remind myself that I have to put everything. And I can't just be like, well, that happened, but they'll never know. Because it's so easy to hide this. They also pointed out in this book that you cannot quite compare binge eating as an addiction. Calling everything an addiction causes some problems because, well, I explain it really good in the book, but you can't call it a food addiction. You're not actually addicted to the food. Though there are groups that would say that. And the 12-step program that you would do with addictions or Alcoholics Anonymous would not work with food because you'd be cutting yourself off right away from everything you like, which would probably lead you to binge, which is bad. What else is in here that was really cool? I was reading and it says you should weigh in on weekdays. Such a simple thing, and I was like, I weigh in on Sundays usually after I party or like have a good night out on Saturday, so that makes no sense. I'm now gonna weigh in on Wednesdays and just write it down, and you can graph it and stuff. When you review on your 3 to 4 days, you check if you've been monitoring yourself or have you been skipping it. Can you improve your monitoring? Have you been skipping parts? And are you weighing yourself? And are you seeing any patterns? That's the number one thing you want to look at. Are you seeing like that every time you're tired or you always binge eat in the evening because you're tired? Have you had any binges? Anything in common with these binges? Are they in the same time of day? What have you been eating? As I said, mine's usually like childhood comfort foods. But a few weeks ago, it would have been anything. Like I would make like really healthy meals and supposed to be divvying them up and I'd eat them all. Are you eating because you're limiting yourself? Are you delaying eating, such as fasting? Are you eating normal meals? Or a normal meal would be. So yeah, and you fill out another little form. And you want to see how many days that are change days. That means how many days for step one that you've monitored and you've actually done this step. And if you have 6 or 7 change days, you can move on to step 2. So I'm actually already pretty good at monitoring. I think I'll be fine at this part, and it'll be interesting to check for patterns the way they want me to. But it is the next step, which is regular eating, establishing a pattern of regular eating. And then I kind of get to skip the next part because it's stopping vomiting and misusing laxatives and diuretics, which I don't use. So it's just going to be regular eating. And that's still going to be tricky for me. So step 2 is going to be a challenge. As of today, this morning was amazing. I got up, I worked, and I actually made myself enough work to keep myself busy till lunch. Then, then lunch ended, and I kept trying to keep myself busy. And I probably, in hindsight, should have done a workout right at lunch when I started realizing that I was getting bored. It was snowing so bad today that I couldn't go outside for a walk or do anything. So of course that gave me a lot of free time to read and to write and to journal, and I looked at cool places I want to go when COVID ends, but still it was a lot of time for my brain to free up and then be like, you know what you want for dinner? Not the yummy chicken that you made and you had a plan to use. You want to order food. You want to order food. And that's all I could think about, and I couldn't push past you want to order food. Then I ordered food and I felt bad about ordering food because I'd already cooked this really good chicken meal. So I ate the chicken meal while the food was coming, and then I ate the food that I ordered. And I also had some cookies while waiting for it. So it was an out of control ordering session, and I felt bad after ordering the food. But then I kind of managed to calm myself down and be like, okay, breathe. This wasn't the most unhealthy meal. And that's where I started getting the idea that maybe I was craving carbs. So, and it was just a dinner, and I didn't make myself feel sick. It was small binging, not the biggest one you can do, or that I've ever done. Still not great though, so not super impressed with that. Also, it didn't taste as good as I was hoping, which sucks. It's from an actual restaurant. So tomorrow, hopefully that doesn't happen. I've made myself a huge to-do list, including painting a wall to try and keep myself busy. And again, in hindsight, I should have meditated because that would have been more helpful than actually just caving and doing it. But it happened. It's time to move on and just try and do better the next day. I'll tell you more tomorrow about how that goes.